Thank you for downloading this podcast from Digital Mindfulness. This is episode 23. Welcome to Digital Mindfulness, where we share insights, wisdom, and tools that you can use to enhance the quality of your digital and digitized lives. I'm Lawrence Ampofo, and my guest today is the tech ethicist David Ryan Polgar. David is a former attorney and educator, but now he explores our ethical, legal, and emotional digital lives. He's very concerned about the impact that emerging technology is having on us at a societal and individual level. And you can find him on television shows, influential publications, talking about different things like tech etiquette, digital diets, digital citizenship, selfie culture, and much more. This is a fascinating talk about technology, its impact on us, and how we can live better, digitized lives. I hope you enjoyed this episode with David Ryan Polgar. Great. So, David, welcome to Digital Mindfulness. Thank you so much for coming, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Oh, I love being here, and I love what you're doing, and I'm glad to kind of join this community. I think we're going to have a great conversation today.
Great. So David, you have a very, very interesting history. Taking a look at all of your, all of your websites and your digital output. So I'm wondering if you can share with the audience what's the story of your coming to be a tech ethicist and generally being interested in improving the way that people use technology.
Well, it really kind of stemmed from my own personal experiences. I have a background as a college professor and an attorney. And what I started doing is noticing that everything I was writing and talking about a few years ago, it all dealt with our evolving relationship with technology. How it was affecting us from an ethical, legal, and emotional perspective. I also started noticing that on all these articles I was reading about tech use and whether we were addicted to them and how we balanced them and just how it was affecting our society at large. They would always interview an attorney, a psychologist, a professor. So I really just started saying, okay, well, this is something that I'm really into. If I could have my chosen path in life, I would dedicate my full time solely to exploring this. So I kind of set that up as my own career path, and now I've actually been able to reach that. So I've transitioned from attorney, college professor, to now kind of being a researcher, a writer, and a frequent speaker about this issue. And then I also work with a larger company called Ask FM as their digital family expert. So now kind of being able to do this full time, which really allows me to be deep into the weeds on this issue and constantly look at what's happening and then hopefully offer some solutions.
So you work with Ask FM. Isn't that the social network that's been pilloried in the media for?
Well,
yeah.
Sure. Well, what's exciting about that as an opportunity is, they recently, about a year and a half ago, they got bought out. So because of their earlier issues, they now have been connected with IAC, a large media company that now owns them, and they've really said, okay, we want to humanize this. We want to incorporate better safety. So they really now have been a leader on safety boards, safety guides, having 24/7 type of monitoring, not only kind of machine-based, but also human-based. So I think it's a constant example of how tech changes, right? Everything is a reaction to an action. So what happened in that case, what happened in a lot of cases, is the public reacts and says, okay, this is what we expect now from a company. And then if a company is progressive, like Ask FM is now, then we make a change. And I think we're seeing that with all of our tech companies. It's not just about what they're putting out, but it's about how the public wants them to act.
That's really interesting because you're right. And I think Ask FM is a really fantastic example because in the past they had such problems with trolling and just a lots of kind of, I guess their core demographic would be teenagers, and teenagers
Correct.
had a lot of problems with, I guess, moderation and kind of like stripping away of just intemperate content. But I think, like you say, across the board, social networks in general, there's a much greater move towards making the online experience safer and
Oh,
getting
it
rid of
certainly is.
trolling.
Because if you take another example, kind of similar to Ask FM, if you take something like Snapchat over the last few years, they've been able to take a company that was largely associated with inappropriate sexting and now been able to build into kind of this multi-billion dollar respected company. And how that's done is by constantly pivoting towards the right direction by incorporating safe, savvy, and ethical. And that's why, I've really focused on digital citizenship, and I do something called Digital Citizenship Summit on this kind of concept of saying social media. And this is important for Ask FM and every tech company. Social media is only as good as we are. Right? There's a certain level of empowerment that needs to happen. So with what I'm doing at Ask FM, with what other tech companies are doing, you really want to incorporate education on the digital citizenship front, engagement between a parent and a teen, and empowerment of that teen. Right? Again, if social media is only as good as we are, a teen needs to feel empowered to make those right decisions, to point out when there's another troll, to have those self-reporting types of mechanisms, to insert empathy into the online experience.
Now, I mean, this is amazing. How then do you do that with self-reporting? I understand that you kind of put a button on there, and that goes to a moderator if a piece of content is not very nice or inappropriate. But how do you insert empathy into the online experience, particularly with social networks?
Sure. Well, with empathy, that's going to be a longer term operation. That's going to have to really go towards uh, education with digital citizenship. So digital citizenship has a lot of different definitions online. I generally define it as the safe, savvy, ethical use of technology. So there's a big push right now for educators to incorporate that in their curriculum. So with that education, it's about teaching kids and teens to care about what they post online, to care about the person on the other side, right? Because that's what I think a little tricky is how do we operate online when now we're dealing with oftentimes a faceless and frictionless society. That person, let's say if I'm on Twitter, that person I'm talking to, I'm communicating with, is a real live human person who has emotions, who can be temperamental, who has feelings that can be hurt by what I say. But it's easy to forget that because they don't look real to me, right? I can't touch them. I can't see their eyes. As humans, we're trained to look at people's faces. So the important part with empathy is I need to realize that it's a person at the end of that account as opposed to a persona. And oftentimes we treat online people as avatars, as personas, as opposed to the real live person that they are. So I think the more that we can incorporate a better understanding and to be mindful, right? This is digital mindfulness, to be mindful of how we interact with people. Because it's easy to go online and just turn off our brain, so to speak, be on autopilot and just say snarky things all the time. But instead, if we could incorporate it as if it's just the global community at large. It's no different than me going down to a coffee house and talking to a person. Well, you know what? I wouldn't say something ridiculous to that barista who's serving me coffee because I'm looking at them. Likewise, how do I take that idea and incorporate it in the online experience?
This is really interesting here, I think, because you're absolutely right, and this division between being understanding that we have people online and not
Mhm.
personas is absolutely fascinating. However, I think in one of our interviews, particularly with Alex Grotowski that just happened, she talks about the importance of privacy and
Mhm.
anonymity online, and that sometimes having personas is actually important. And I'm interested to know what's your position on this? Do you think that privacy and again having avatars or personas is important?
I do think it is, and obviously that's where anonymity is a hot topic. But anonymity comes with responsibility, and that's the key part that we're forgetting a lot of times. Is that there is a huge value in being able to explore when it's not attached to your actual name, because especially if you're a teenager nowadays, right? When you were a teenager, when I was a teenager, we got to do things that weren't on a Google search now, right? We got to do things that were forgettable. But here I am. I'm in the United States. We don't have the right to be forgotten in the United States. So if a 16-year-old does something that's a mistake that they regret, if they post a picture that they want taken down, now it can really impact their entire reputation. So I think you've seen a kind of a counterweight to that, where kind of the rise of something like Snapchat. You have teenagers saying, I want to be able to say something that's not permanent in nature. And the same thing you're talking about with anonymous posting. There needs to be a little bit of an outlet where we don't constantly feel under surveillance. Right, it's a little bit of pressure to feel like we're brand managers. I honestly, I don't think everybody in the world should feel like they're a major brand that constantly needs to be curated and constantly needs to have a PR machine behind them. There's a lot of pressure for that. I think that's why just a few days ago there was a big story where an 18-year-old on Instagram, who was an Instagram star, she quit social media, and what she said is it burnt her out because she was so tired of having to project this false persona. So it's kind of a sad sight when an 18-year-old gets burned out in life, right? So I think the larger picture is we need to reframe our relationship with social media to reach a healthy balance. But I think anonymity does offer less surveillance. It offers us to explore in a lot of ways that we wouldn't, especially if you're a teenager and you want to talk about topics that are uncomfortable. What if you're exploring something that you wouldn't want kind of traced online? A lot of questions that might go on internally that you want to figure out. Whereas before in life, you would ask somebody, you would read a book, and nothing would be kind of traced back to you. But because everything is so traceable nowadays, there needs to be a little bit of outlet to kind of allow for that exploration. But again, the big caveat with that is that anonymity again comes with responsibility, and we can't take that lightly. We all need to be digital citizens, and with citizenship as different from just being born into the world, a citizen is cognizant of the people around them because they realize that they are a spoke in the wheel of society, and that society benefits by their own personal behavior. So likewise, being anonymous online, that comes with that responsibility of saying, okay, well, if your behavior is negative, that negativity is going to be able to spread out. And obviously, a lot of studies have kind of shown that too, is that both negativity and positivity online tend to spread throughout the community. If we see negative, and they saw that with that recent Facebook study, when you see negative posts, you tend to be in a more negative framework of mind. So likewise, when you can kind of have that anonymity, you want to take that responsibility and say, okay, well, even though I have that, I'm not going to generally say things to somebody that are completely mean-spirited or defamatory.
That's really interesting, that idea that your behavior actually does impact the wider community when you go and you interact
Oh,
with it in whatever way.
certainly does.
But this also speaks to what you were saying about, and you've mentioned it a few times, this whole idea of citizenship or digital citizenship. And I know that you have an event on this, but could you just explain a little bit more about both the concept and the event?
Yeah. Well, what we've done is we said, all right, a lot of people are talking about various issues. We're talking about tech balance, digital health, copyright, uh, online safety, online reputation. And what digital citizenship is an umbrella term that encompasses all of that. Again, similar to a citizenship government type of class that oftentimes people have to take in high school, there really needs to be a push for that throughout the world on teaching people how to correctly use the internet or use technology in general. We do training on everything else in life, right? Nobody just gives you a driver's license. You have to take courses. You have to get a license to show that you know how to be a safe person on the road. Likewise, digital citizenship is a movement towards that, kind of having a driver's license, if you will, for the global community. Is that we shouldn't just give somebody a smartphone, have them sign on, and constantly communicate without knowing how to properly communicate. With being involved with people throughout the globe without knowing what is appropriate, what's inappropriate, how do they maintain a certain level of privacy, how do they verify the people they're talking to maintain a certain level of safety, prevent catfishing, be careful of certain other aspects that sometimes people get in trouble with. But then also the positives, you want to incorporate a certain level of online savviness. The internet, at its very nature, offers so many positive potentials if we can really distill what the internet is allowing. Really, digital mindfulness, your podcast, is a great example of its potential, because now, instead of it being based in a sole location where your audience is limited based on geography, now you can have people in Brazil, in the United States, in South Africa listening in. I mean, that's amazing potential. And likewise, you've got 100 other examples of that we can capture if done correctly. And that's what we're trying to do with digital citizenship. We're not taking a negative approach to it. We're doing quite the opposite. We're taking a positive approach to it and saying we want people to be safe, savvy, and ethical. And what we're doing, especially with the Digital Citizenship Summit that I recently put on October 3rd here in the United States, and then we're trying to put on globally, and we're going to have it yearly here in the United States, and then globally, every year in various locations throughout the world, is this concept of saying everybody is talking about tech use, but oftentimes we're speaking different languages. Oftentimes we're not bringing together those stakeholders. We have industry saying one thing and parents saying another, and we have educators saying yet another. What if we brought industry, parents, educators, administrators, students together at the same proverbial table and had them communicate in a way to say, okay, what do we want to do? For example, with Facebook, they recently had a hot discussion around empathy online. How do they incorporate that into some type of button? Should there be a dislike button? What if somebody posts something like their dog just died? Are you supposed to like that? Well, you don't like that their dog died, but you're trying to show that you care about that person and that you feel a sense of shared sorrow, right? But there wasn't a good symbol for that. Well, that's a great discussion for something like a Digital Citizenship Summit that would bring together those groups and say, okay, given my frame of reference, what would be an ideal button? I think it's shown us the power of social media is that we cared so much about every little thing that Facebook does, right? That shows you the power of something like Facebook, that we want to be involved in that discussion. We don't want it like, hey, they're a clothing company that's coming out with their clothing. Quite the opposite. Facebook is the modern public square where everything that goes on there, we have a invested interest in.
This I like this because it sounds like what you're talking about here is, or a large part of what you're talking about is that we have to be literate. We're going to have to be digitally literate, and you're right. Being online, this is not something that we're really trained in. We're trained, I guess, technically. How to get online, how to get a Wi-Fi connection, but in terms of how to orient ourselves, how we should act. Understanding maybe the effects that other people's words might have on us, and maybe this is not something that we're trained in. So I'm wondering, what do you think? How can people be more digitally literate, do you think?
Well, I think a lot of that is going to be from a parent standpoint. I see this all the time that parents, when they're dealing with their kids or teens, they oftentimes feel insecure because they see what their child is doing and they say, wait a minute, they're tech savvier than I am. How can I possibly parent them in any fashion? How can I teach them something? But what we're forgetting is that while there's a new app coming out every minute, apps and technology change, but what doesn't change is the social and behavioral skills. What we're talking about with digital literacy, what we're talking about with digital citizenship, even though the technology has changed, is still relatively the same of how we've always taught people to be in society. We're still incorporating this basic level of citizenship with being kind online, with respecting things like copyright, with having empathy. The technology has changed, but again, the style is very similar. So what we need to do is we need to kind of have that confidence level to say, this is something for everybody. Don't feel insecure about the fact that the technology is always changing. And I say that because that's the constant comment I always hear is, how can I possibly keep up? Here I'm learning about Snapchat, but then now you're telling me about this new hot app that everybody's using. Well, again, this is where, from a parent-child standpoint, you want to have that fluid conversation. And that's why I use those 3 E's of education, empowerment, and engagement. A lot of people forget that, is that kids and teens want to talk to their parents generally and educators about their tech use. And frankly, you can kind of flip it around where that child or teen is teaching that adult the technology, teaching them what Snapchat is. It actually happened yesterday. I was at an event, a college campus, and the professor, she didn't know anything about Snapchat. So then the college student was actually saying, here, let me show you, right? That's what we're forgetting, is that teens, students, kids, technology is such an integral part of their life, social media especially, that they actually can feel empowered and engaged if we speak to them at a level that respects their standpoint and respects their opinion. So I think that's the kind of larger issue. In addition, with digital literacy and digital citizenship, we really need to push the legislative branches to incorporate that into our curriculum for teaching. It's a tricky value because it's not just the parents teaching it to their kids. It's also educators, right? The educators are kind of the backbone of our society, and they spend a lot of time with kids and teens, and they can serve as a valuable resource to really kind of inject that. You're also seeing librarians and media specialists take a very active role in digital citizenship and digital literacy to incorporate that into their training. And that's why I've been very impressed with how libraries over the last few years have been able to pivot in a successful manner to say, hey, we're now media literacy experts. We're an avenue to properly train people on the correct use of media. Because when we look at media literacy, it's generally defined as being able to critically consume and produce media, right? That's where we need educators to take an active role in this.
You've been speaking about digital citizenship,
Yes.
and one of the other projects that you work on is this thing called Humanize the Brand. And I'm wondering whether you think that organizations also have a responsibility to be digital citizens.
Oh, I certainly do. I really think that starting now, you're going to see this kind of concept of what we call CSR, right? Corporate social responsibility, is now being injected into the DNA of all these companies, where they're saying, okay, well, I am really impacting society in general, and now I have a little bit of an ethical responsibility to be human about it, to care about the impact that my product has. I think what we're realizing is that it's not just about an app. When you hear the term app, you think of something that is trivial in nature. But you take something like Airbnb or Uber, okay? They are very serious companies, especially Uber is valued right now at over 40 billion US dollars, okay? Huge valuation. In addition, they impact how you get around, transportation. That's something that emotionally impacts us and affects us. It's not enough to say, hey, it's just an app. We're just creating something and you consume it. They now have a certain level of responsibility to care about how it's being utilized. So, for example, I know with Uber, a hot topic is how you can rate the driver, but the driver also rates you. This is something where if you're Uber, you want to incorporate the feedback of whether that's a good policy, how we can tweak that policy, what's the potential downsides of that. Does that manipulate how we then interact with the driver? If all of a sudden I feel like my low rating as a passenger can impact whether I get picked up or not, does that mean that I'm going to pretend like I like the driver when I don't? Right? There's a lot of strange issues that come about from this. So I really see a big push towards companies that are saying, you know what, we care about this, or we need to care about this. So that's why I have humanizingyourbrand.com that I've worked with a bunch of Fortune 500 companies on that, and also I'm doing another project called Humanizing the Future, that's focused on this idea where I'm just talking to a bunch of different people from diverse backgrounds about what it means to be human in the 21st century, and more important, how would you humanize the future?
And I know we spoke about this in the pre-interview, but this whole idea of changing our metrics, and this is something that
Mm.
Tristan Harris from Google in our previous interview, this is what we spoke about, but this whole idea of um, changing what how we view success in the online world, right? That maybe we shouldn't be looking at just the number of likes and the number of check-ins or the amount of traffic. That maybe we should be looking at something else that kind of emphasizes how we as humans, I don't know, how well we live our lives in this digitized world.
Well, yeah, because to that point, what metrics has done is it's created a path of kind of least resistance. It's kind of like it's the age old question. We're always fighting to be happy in life, right? When we say, what's the secret to happiness? And oftentimes, certain people they kind of get misled and they say, okay, well then it's solely about money, and they're going after that, and then they end up being miserable, right? And then we have a movie about it, just this concept that we're focused on the wrong thing. Well, isn't that analogous to our focus right now on metrics? Because what's happened is we've become accustomed to saying, okay, well now I'm being judged all the time, right? Now I'm being assessed. So can I game that system? And is that going to lead to me being popular, to me being happy, right? So if I'm looking at how many followers I have, should I just try to up that? Well, of course, that's going to be a problem. If you spend your sole day on gaining followers, what's the quality of your life? So I think right now there's been a huge push on the quantification of life, right? And we even call it the quantified self movement. But what about the qualitative life? I think that's where I personally would like to see a big push towards. We want to focus on the actual quality of that. But I think it's a little bit of a struggle because we have psychology working against us, right? We have the metrics that oftentimes can be a motivating factor for us to act in certain ways that are against our wishes. So when I post something online, what if what I really value as a human, what if nobody cares about that? Right? What if that doesn't generate a lot of likes? Well, then the next one is something that's just snarky that I don't really care about and it gets a lot of likes. Well, I have a big decision to make. If I'm chasing the likes, then I'm going to change how I interact with the larger social media kind of world, and I'm going to just start posting things to get the likes because that validates my own, intellectual ability, my humor, in other aspects, or attractiveness if people are posting photos. So, do we post a more authentic idea of who we are, or do we post something that is for a larger brand? Have we become kind of, I guess, our own brands? So personally, I like to see kind of a movement towards an authentic online experience. I think it'd be great if there was a day where everybody said, on social media today, I'm just going to post what I really, what I really feel like. And like imagine that. Right? And at certain times, people do that on Instagram. I know sometimes you have people who say, "Okay, here's what I look like for women without makeup." But it'd be great if everybody said, it's let's call it, we have a day on social media. Today, I'm just going to post what I really care about. So if I care about gardening, I'm going to talk about gardening, but we'll see.
It's uh, this whole topic is so fascinating because this leads to what we were talking about, and again in the pre-interview, that this is like an existential problem.
Oh, it is.
Who are we? Who are we? Am I online? Am I the person? Am I Lawrence the person, or am I a persona? Am I someone else? Am I an avatar that I create? And we were talking about this earlier, that it is important to have the two. It is important sometimes to be able to be forgotten, or to have anonymity, or to be able to create the avatars. But then, of course, if we do need to be literate. We do need to be able to maybe talk to teenagers or to people that aren't experienced online, and have them understand that it is okay to be themselves. They don't have to
Right.
construct this brand or a separate ego of themselves. But then, of course, if we're constantly being monitored, and the content that we put online is then just being marketed back to us, um, that's also a problem as well, isn't it? So that's why I see that actually things like the Digital Citizenship
Hmm.
Summit are so important, not just for individual people, but also for um, businesses and organizations. Like, actually, is it ethical to sell our likes and everything? Is it, should we be doing that, selling that back to us, especially when so many people are looking for meaning and identity online?
Well, I think that's why, to that point, there was a popular article recently, an op-ed piece in the New York Times, where the author was stating, "Hey, I would pay for Facebook. Uh, is it something where eventually social media is going to change their business model? Because right now you generally have the free model, but then it is monetized through data collection, right, and advertising. Uh, how would social media be different if we were paying $8 a month, US dollars a month, for the use of that? Would that change our experience? Would it feel less pressure to be monetized in likes and advertising and data collection? So it's just an interesting idea. We'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if down the road, a competitor comes out and says, "Hey, this is my new part. We're going to have paid social media, but here's the value that you're getting." Because that's what we forget a lot of times, is when we sign on to Facebook, it's free, but it's not free at the same time, right? It's free, but it's still a capitalist business model that needs to make money, and that has it's a public company that has shareholders that are looking for it to increase its profitability, and the profitability really is us as a not only a consumer, but really kind of a spoke in that larger wheel.
I agree. Well, David, this unfortunately, we've come to the end of the
Okay.
interview, but where can people find out more about you and your work?
Sure. A lot of different places. Oftentimes, I'm referred to as a tech ethicist. So if you want to go to techethicist.com, also on Twitter as at techethicist, and then the projects that I have, the Digital Citizenship Summit is you can go to digcitsummit.com, or also bethedigitalchange.com. Then on that, you'll see a lot of the other sites that I have, such as humanizingthefuture.com.
Fantastic. So, David, and I need to say, it's David Ryan Polgar,
Correct.
isn't it
Yep.
now? Like, and there's in
Well,
fact, there's a little bit of a story behind that, behind your
yeah,
full name.
well, because the problem we never talk about is Google gangers, people with your own name, right? So how do you separate that? And that's an issue that I really hope some tech people are able to solve in the future. So it's kind of like an inside joke. I'm like, well, I'm David Ryan Polgar. Now I'm unique. My mom always said I'm a snowflake, and now I can be. And frankly, you have to make in 21st century, you have to make yourself, if you want to be found, right? You have to make it so somebody can Google you and then contact you. But it's hard to do that if you have a lot of people with your same name, especially when you talk about online reputation. The Google ganger concept, right? Your doppelganger on a
Yeah.
Google search, that can create a lot of issues. So I said, you know what? David Ryan Polgar is who I am.
Well, David Ryan Polgar, thank you so much for spending time with us this afternoon. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me, Lauren.
That was a great show with David Ryan Polgar. Understanding that negativity spreads online in exactly the same way it does offline, that anonymity comes with responsibility, and also how we can learn to humanize our brands is absolutely fascinating. Everything that we spoke about is linked to in the show notes. And thank you so much for downloading this podcast. We're really looking forward to being with you next week.